Hello and welcome. I am honored to be leading this discussion on behalf of WISPA America. We're doing a virtual presentation here on rebranding, why and how. My name is Alyssa Miller. I'm the CEO of iMiller Public Relations and the president of NEDAS, and I am accompanied by Matt Larson, the CEO of VistaBeam, Harneet Singh, Director of Marketing for Praseem. So Matt, would you welcome our viewers here today?
Yes, good to see everyone. Wish we'd have been able to see people in person, but as a result of world events, we're going to try this out. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this works, and bear with us. We're trying to figure it out too.
We're all in this together, right, Harneet?
Yep, that's it. That's the spirit. We are all in this together, but separately.
Absolutely. So, just if we can, just warm up a little bit here, let our audience know a little bit more about us. Matt, why don't you just give, maybe, minute overview, who you are, what you do. That would be great to help frame that up for us.
Sure. So I've been doing wireless for a little over 20 years now, fixed wireless, and have watched the industry grow. Where I used to be one of the young guys, now I'm one of the old timers, and have seen a lot of different things happen over the years. So I'm it's kind of fun to talk about branding as opposed to more technical issues, which is what we used to focus on considerably. But it's been really interesting to dig into this lately, and kind of looking forward to visiting about it.
Got it. I'm excited to hear about what you're going to share through all of your years of experience, branding, and is part of company leadership. So thanks for being here. Harneet, why don't you give your quick overview if you don't mind?
Absolutely. So I'm the head of marketing for Praseem. Praseem is a software product which we sell to the WISPs. I've been doing marketing for about 10 years now, actually more than that. So I've always enjoyed topics like branding and rebranding and brand management and strategy and whatnot. With Praseem, obviously, I've had the luxury of working with a lot of WISPs. We currently work with hundreds of WISPs directly. And as the head of marketing for Praseem, I do understand the space as an outsider. So I was not one of their own, but they have taken me to be one of their own pretty good and pretty quickly. So it's great to work with them, and I'm absolutely happy to help any of the WISPs who listen to this one to be able to help them with their marketing or their strategy or their rebranding exercises. So trying to share whatever I know, and hopefully they can gain something out of it.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys. I know we're going to have a great discussion here. So just for our viewers here, here's a quick overview of what we're going to talk about. Basically, rebrand, why and how. We just did our introductions. We're going to talk about brand refresh, which is different than a rebrand. We're going to talk about the why rebrand, what to expect, how to rebrand, the pre-planning, because there's a lot of planning that goes into a rebranding and a brand refresh exercise, final planning, go to market, things to remember, and then results to expect. For starters, we're going to show some logos and have some commentary on them. Our commentary is meant to be supportive and not critical. And I hope you can join us in taking a look at some of the brand refresh logos that we're going to go through here. So taking a look at NANOG, which is the North American Network Operators Group, they did a rebrand in the past couple of years. You can see on the left-hand side on your screen, you have the old logo, and on the right-hand side, the new logo. Any thoughts? Matt, Harneet?
I really like the colors on the new one, and it does seem to convey a little bit more, conveys more of an image of connectivity than the initial one.
I agree with Matt here. So, I mean, you can see the white and blue, since the launch of Facebook and all the cool startups in the world, white and blue have come back to the world of branding. And you can see that in their design. It's much cleaner. The logo, the text, it's not on top of each other. So it's kind of, separate. And I really like the clean design.
Does anybody else see the white N in the box, the blue box for the NANOG logo? It's kind of cool too.
It's pretty cool.
Netflix, well, we all know Netflix, right? You see the old and the new logo. It's very evident, right, Matt?
Yep, definitely some 90s drop shadow going on in that first one, which doesn't necessarily translate very well to print.
I think
Absolutely. Yeah.
I can't remember which one of you was that commented. The traditional Netflix were discs that were mailed, and so when you're thinking about a brand or a brand refresh like they did, translating your logo from print to digital has to be consideration.
Yep, I mentioned that point, and I think if you look at the fact that Netflix has moved from, as Matt calls it, like the heavy 80s and 90s shadow font over to something which is much cleaner and has only uses two colors, in white and black, white and red. That's also kind of in sync with their overall shift as a company, going from, as I said, a print and as a company which mails you the DVDs you want to watch, over to a company which is online streaming. So you can see their transition. They're trying to represent the future, and obviously the logo change clearly signifies that.
I like how the logo, while the font is, fairly benign, right? The name it has movement to it. It's got an arc to it. Here's a brand, right? It's still out there, Yahoo. Very similar to that drop shadow, right, Matt?
Yes, except I kind of like the old one better than the new one, but
Yahoo is a case study in almost every branding school I can imagine. They almost, the joke is that whenever they have a new marketing team, the first thing they do is change the brand.
Yeah.
So with Yahoo, it's like every other day you see a new logo, and I think they've had some hits but a lot of misses. So honestly, I like the left one too because it's slimmer. It looks better on the phone. But Yahoo keeps changing it so many times. It's hard to keep record of what Yahoo is doing with their logo. So that's definitely a failure in terms of my thoughts on those.
And the key thing that we're seeing here with the brand refresh is that it's really not a tremendous move for the most part, right? It's bringing things more modern, maybe a bit more relevant to today's time. It's not a name change. It's just a refresh of it. Slack, very similar, right? Again, it's not a lot of change. It's very subtle and slight. I think Harneet, you may have had some comments on this one when we were first talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, Slack is it's all in the news these days, along with some other video conferencing tools. Everybody knows Slack. It's a tool which helps you talk within the teams and across the teams. And again, if you look at the shift, like if you look at the refresh, it goes back to the fact that Slack did it because they were initially only looked as a replacement for company email. So, in their website, if you go to, they used to talk about the fact that Slack can replace your company email. So internally, you don't have to send hundreds of emails to get an approval. You can just chat on Slack and get it done. But now, as you see, more companies are, working remotely, working across different companies, and now you have teams from different companies working together. It is clearly visible that Slack is now much more than just an email replacement. It is a tool which can help companies talk amongst different teams and across companies as well. So you see the change in the logo. It's kind of the icon there represents kind of humans coming together and doing stuff. So I really like the logo change.
Yeah, and the logo itself looks like people sitting at their computers, right? The little heads all
getting together
back to back and with one another. It's funny. I'm just going to quickly touch upon this one, and apologies for the background noise. Facebook here, they did not change their Facebook logo for the online platform, for their social networking platform, but they did change the Facebook logo for their corporate brand. So I think it's interesting to note that that's another thing to consider is how do you differentiate between a platform or an app and your company name? And this is how Facebook decided to do it. Zenfi. Zenfi is a company that is also in the wireless space. You could see that wireless symbol there. Very simple change, nuanced change. They kind of take that old paint look, moved it over into a modern era, but still keeping in tune with who they are from their initial brand when that came out to market. Here's another one. This happens to be a company, one of my companies. We rebranded from the Northeast DAS and Small Cell Association to NEDAS, which everybody called us NEDAS anyway. So, I put this in as a brand refresh rather than a rebrand, since everybody kind of knew who we all were. And we're going to be transitioning into some rebranding altogether. And I think that this is a good segue for us to talk about rebranding in the fixed wireless space, right, Harneet?
Absolutely. So happy to talk about this. This basically represents the fact that, as all of us know, most of us know that Google is in the fixed wireless space. They keep trying new stuff, and their wireless gigabit internet service, it's not available across the US, but it's definitely available across key target markets they work with. For example, Austin is one of those places in Texas where Google has deployed. Actually, they went first with their fixed wireless services. So initially, they acquired a company called WebPass, and WebPass became WebPass from Google Fiber, and Google provided the fiber backend, and then WebPass would be the company connecting people wirelessly, as any other WISP would do. Now, when Google moved and decided that they want to merge their fixed wireless and their fiber internet service into one, they came up with the Google Fiber WebPass branding, which you can see on the right. Now, the interesting thing about this is, obviously, they are trying to explain or signify their integrated experience. The fact that fiber and wireless are just access technologies to deliver fast internet, which is, again, a good thing. It's a good thing for the fact that WISPs can take pride in that, wireless is not considered to be just, another low-level technology. It's a cutting-edge fixed wireless technology which they can use to deploy internet services. Now, for Google, the smart thing they're trying to do is the fact that they now have an integrated unified brand, which is Google Fiber WebPass. They can walk into new markets and say, hey, we're deploying our wireless services at the moment, but they can still call it Google Fiber WebPass, which kind of signifies to you that as and when Google will be able to roll out fiber technologies directly to those customers, they can still use the same brand. And obviously, there will be all the investments in marketing time and resources, which they can leverage the fact that you have one unified service going into new markets. So, and I think it's pretty interesting that they will already have branding available, and it gives them the flexibility to go from fiber to wireless. So I think it's pretty unique what Google's trying to do here and bring an integrated experience, as they like to call it.
There's so much packed in there, right? Because at the end of the day, a wireless network has to go to a wire line. So it makes perfect sense to have it be fully integrated as a brand. And if you think about the promise of 5G, it's supposed to be as fast as fiber anyway. So, Google Fiber, whether it's in the sky or in the ground, right? It's kind of cool. Here's another rebranding example. This is completely new company name. You wouldn't have known it if you looked at the different brands, and that was done on purpose. Metro NS provides network services, and now they are Connect City. They are connecting cities for smart city deployments, and so that helped to tell their integrated story. Here's another one. They're rebranding from ViaWest to Flexential. This one has to do with the fact that ViaWest and Peak 10 were acquired and merged together, and as a result, not one of those particular brands wanted to be the winner, so they came up with a new one. I kind of like the name Flexential. It's flexible and essential, right? Here's another interesting one, right, Harneet?
Absolutely. So talking about more examples from the WISP space, obviously we're talking about WISP America's virtual avatars. So let's talk about the WISP market, right? What we see today is a lot of consolidation. We see a lot of mergers and acquisitions and things like that, which again, going back to Elisa's first point, that branding can happen for a lot of reasons. We've seen people changing it just because they want to refresh their identity, or we can also see cases where it's required because you did something, you took some corporate action, and now you need a new brand. So interesting thing which I find in the WISP space are basically two phenomena. One is the no branding phenomena. So you will have a company like Watch Communications. They're a large WISP in the US, and they constantly acquire new startups and other WISPs. Now, if you look at the companies they've acquired, they didn't have to change their brands. So Watch Communications, if I can understand their branding strategy, they realize that companies like Beyond Media and Q Wireless, the companies they've acquired, they do have a strong emotional connection with the rural communities and the other communities they provide internet to. So what Watch Communication is trying to do is they have bought them, but they're not asking them to change them into one unified brand. So that I see a lot. There's a lot of companies in the market who have bought other operators, but continue to let them use the branding they had, and just became part of one parent organization. On similar to this, there was a company in South Africa. Is a company in South Africa called Herotel, which is one of the largest WISPs in the world. Actually, they're pretty big in South Africa, but they definitely count amongst the top 10 I can count in terms of WISPs across the world. Now, their business strategy is inorganic, which means they will buy companies. That's what they do, and that's their business strategy. So interestingly, Herotel, like Watch Communications, until 2020, used to buy companies and let them retain their company name, but add something they call the national character. So let's say they bought a company called ABC Telecom, and ABC Telecom's website will start featuring Herotel's logo and saying that, we are now part of the One Nation Herotel umbrella. So that's what the branding strategy was. But now recently, I've seen that they've completely moved away from letting the brands maintain their own strategy to then coming together under one single brand. So if you go to any of their new acquired companies, you can see on their website that they've now said that a new brand is coming. So new Herotel branding vision is coming in 2020. And obviously, this represents a big change from their previous strategy to just let people be what they want to be.
Yeah, and we're going to touch upon all of the reasons why very, very soon. Matt, as I alluded to in the introductions, really eager for you to share your story about VistaBeam. I think it's a great evolution of a brand story.
Sure. So when we started out, we actually started out with the brand name of Skybeam. And Skybeam was a company that I had some partial ownership in, but we ended up having an issue and split ways. So we had a forced rebranding, and we kind of had to come up with something in a hurry. And the original Skybeam, we loved the name and what they had done with it, but basically they ripped off the BMW logo to go with the cool Skybeam name. So we went through a bunch, and because we live in a very scenic area with a lot of vistas, we thought that Vista was a good tag for it. So we came up with VistaBeam, and then kind of mildly ripped off the Volkswagen logo for our original. And you can see we kept it relatively simple, but it did have some, it had a couple of things that made it look good on a computer, but it didn't translate quite as well to print when we did that. So we did that. We had a tagline that we used for a while. As you can see there in 2006, we added broadband available here, and we used a lot of local photography to kind of show some of the really remote areas that we cover. And yeah, it got some attention, but it didn't really catch on like we thought it would. But that's what you can imagine. We were very focused on the technology side as opposed to branding. This was stuff that we just kind of did in our spare time, as it were, in which there wasn't very much since we were a very small operation. You can go on the next slide. We had over the last few years, we started to really spend some more time trying to really refine the brand into something that was going to translate a lot better across different media. And over 2016, 2017, we refined the logo up. You can see we simplified it, took out all the different color variations, settled on the two colors basically that we wanted to make sure that we maintained in it. And that really made it pop when it came to putting that onto a shirt or a truck wrap or in print. It really helped out a lot with that. We also added some different brand names for some of our higher speed packages. So we started this Freedom Spectrum name for our new high speed packages. So we had basically transitioned from offering like 4 meg, 8 meg, 16 meg packages to 25, 50, and 100 meg. And this is the name we came up with. And the whole name of Freedom Spectrum came from I was at a conference, and a guy from one of the cell phone companies kind of made fun of Wi-Fi and unlicensed spectrum. So it's just free spectrum. And I literally stood up in the back of the room and I said, "You're wrong, sir. That's Freedom Spectrum." And so I'd registered the domain and kept that for several years before we finally put that out there. But we ended up coming up with what I thought was a pretty cool logo for it. However, kind of short-lived, because not long after we released this, Charter decided to rebrand their service to be Spectrum. And so we knew that the use of Freedom Spectrum was going to, our ability to use that was going to be limited. So we knew that we were going to have to change that brand name and transition into something else. If you go on to the next one, can show where we ended up. We actually spent a lot of time with a branding and marketing consultant that worked with us, and culminated in a meeting with our leadership team where we took a solid 2 hours to talk about core values and how we saw ourselves as a company. And it was just very eye-opening. It was very honest to get everybody in the room. We engineered complete agreement in the direction we wanted to go. And the direction we decided to pursue was that we were still going to be a value-priced service, a value-priced broadband service, and we were going to focus on offering exceptional customer service, especially in comparison to what companies were getting from most of the bigger national operators. So as part of that, we tried out several taglines and ended up settling on extraordinary connections. It's fairly generic. It doesn't have to be wireless. It doesn't have to be fiber. It can, but the main thing we were trying to focus on was that we were going to take care of our customers and be extraordinary in how we handled ourselves with relation to our customers and the kind of service that we provided. We also actually created a style guide, which is, these are the colors you use, these are the fonts you use, these are the specific graphics, with all the different pieces that go along with it. If you're going to do very much with marketing, you really have to come up with the way of defining your brand so that it doesn't sneak off balance. And you'd be surprised. We've had some situations where we've got stuff back in print and it didn't match up. The colors weren't right, and it got sent back. So we've been once established, we've been very diligent to make sure that we protected all of that, to make sure that anything that came out met our quality standard.
And we're going to absolutely touch on that coming up in some of our slides as well. So let's just take a step back. And we alluded to some of this in the presentation of these logos. I think it's good to just kind of wet the palate, if you will, get a sense of what is a rebrand, what is a brand refresh. And so, you talked about it, Matt, you had to, right? Legally, you had to. You need to is another, way to put it. I think when I had acquired the Northeast DAS and Small Cell Association, we were asked to also rebrand or change an aspect of the name. I think it was originally the Northeast DAS and Small Cell Forum. And the Small Cell Forum folks called me up and said, "Hey, would you mind?" And I didn't have any issues with that, right? So, sometimes it's to play nice, sometimes it's legally, and sometimes it could be just to, make sure that you're not getting confused in the marketplace. Maybe the trademark or the brand name is owned by somebody else, and all of those reasons. Harneet, right? Sometimes you want to, or you would like to. You're kind of old. It stayed, right?
Absolutely. I mean, at times you've been running a brand for a while, and you think that the company has kind of evolved and things are different now, and you have the resources, the team, and you kind of represent a new, maybe a new business as well. So you started with something, and today you realize that you're in a different market altogether, and maybe it's time for a brand rebrand exercise. So you just want to do it.
Mm-hmm. I do think I like the, sometimes you want to or would like to is a little bit like the feel like it. But there are certainly executives, and we all know many of them, who just feel like it, and it's a big endeavor to just run into if you just feel like it. And with some of the logos we went through, like I think the Slack logo is a great example. Well, it's a new decade. A lot of especially forward-thinking brands in the hyperscale area, in the mass consumer appeal, they're looking at a new decade. We're in 2020. Now it's time to refresh. And there are companies and branding experts that do feel that every 5-10 years they have their reasons for it, but they do feel that that is the time to also reinvigorate your brand. And I'll tell you, none of these are wrong reasons, including the new decade, including the way you feel like it. And you'll know why as we go through our program here. I want to talk about this quite a bit because, both of you, Harneet and Matt, you talked about the process, right? What to expect in this process. Matt, you talked about that 2-hour session where you got to really hear everyone's opinions. I bet you in that room you had a lot of people who didn't want to go through this process or felt like it was a waste of time, right?
Well, so many people will just kind of disregard it. And it's like, well, that's not my focus. Marketing takes care of that, or, these guys are going to do this and that. So it was like, there was a little bit of pushback, especially from some of the technical corners of the business, about why are we involved in this process? And it's because, the leadership team, we need to make sure everybody buys in. And I've been part of companies where there was a disconnect, where the marketing people just kind of do one thing. And that's where you run into situations where marketing goes off and promises a bunch of things, and they create this brand that doesn't really reflect the product that's going out there. And what was important was that our technical department was very proud of the work that they were doing, and had really changed the focus and the direction our company had taken to provide a better quality of service than we had done in the past. And they wanted to make sure that that work they were doing was properly reflected in our brand. They didn't want us to go out and make promises that we couldn't deliver on. So that's part of it. When it comes to design, man, everybody's got an opinion on how stuff should look. Mm-hmm. But when you get the focus group together and you're kind of forced to get kind of a general consensus, you find that everybody will tend to agree towards the one that actually really works well and represents everything. So that was a great way to get that 2 hours of pain. Took a giant chunk of all the objections that show up here out of the running right off the bat. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is to get everybody together and get them on the same page.
And I talk about opinions. Opinions aren't bad. When we went through those logo exercises, we all saw something different. And it's being able to listen to that feedback and that reaction. At the end of the day, a brand is an emotional reaction that you're trying to elicit from people. So if people have opinions, you want to hear that first look opinion, and then maybe you can explain the why behind the logo or the colors or other things. And they may be open to changing their opinion, but it is about that reaction that you're trying to get from people. Harneet, why don't you talk about some of these brand equity concerns and the process? You went through some great examples earlier, and we could only surmise that some of those WISPs are leveraging their brand equity to now put behind some of those smaller companies that they're acquiring.
Absolutely. So, brand equity is all about the sum value, the sum estimated value you can put upon of your brand. So you think that you spend years and years trying to build something of value, and now you think that let's talk about, we were talking about VistaBeam as well. So Skybeam had some value, some equity in it, and then now you're moving to a different one. You obviously have your reasons about it, but if somebody is trying to do a rebranding exercise or somebody is initiating that in a company, obviously there will be pushback, and that pushback can be very legitimate as well, like saying that we have spent 10 years, let's say, building this brand to what it is today. We got to have better reasons why we are doing this. So if you look at that factors, brand equity concerns are very legitimate, especially in the WISP example we talked about. If you are going into a rural market and let's say a company is acquiring another one, that company has been in that community. Maybe everybody recognizes that name in the community, and now when you rebrand everything to a new foreign alien entity, and there's got to be some pushback to it. So again, it comes back to the whole idea of respecting people's opinion, letting them know that's a long process. But more important is the why. If everybody comes on board and as the senior management or everybody involved can ensure that people buy into the idea of why we're doing it, I think everything else would be way easier, to implement.
Mm-hmm. And I think, Matt, from your experience, right, you went through the process over a period of a couple of years, not just, from, you had to quickly pivot to the new company name and the new logo, but, it wasn't just that, it wasn't just one and done. It was a process, right?
Yeah. Well, and to just kind of refer to some Harney was talking about, we've done a lot of acquisitions, and we've come into a lot of places. The reason we were doing the acquisition was because somebody wanted out. And a lot of times when somebody wants out, they have not really been taking care of the business very well. So it was a good opportunity for us to rebrand and come in and say, okay, we are not those guys. We are devoted to providing a quality level of service and to really push that. So rebranding in those situations has been great. But you need to be able to back your brand up, or else it will turn against you because you're only as good as your reputation. So you can rebrand and it will fool a few people and the marketing will make it look like a new company. But if you don't change your underlying product to reflect a higher level of quality, or at least equivalent level of quality, then your brand change is going to be a failure.
Yeah, and I'm sure you remember when you went through that exercise with that branding firm, I'm sure you heard over and over again, well, Matt, what is your brand promise? Right?
Yeah.
And that's how they came up, with the exceptional service and, extraordinary service, sorry, right? It's because that's your promise, and that becomes the amplification that you want to put out there. You are going to get a lot of fails in this process, a lot of rejections. Think about it as if you were looking for a new house or a new apartment. How many have you gone through before you found the one that you would be happy with, or that you love, or that you can live with? It's the same thing with brand names and logos and colors and all that. Don't be afraid to fail, right? And then, if you have a great idea, Google it. I'm sure it was already taken, and if not, you're in luck, right? And we'll talk about all of these types of things. So a key thing, and again, Matt, you talked about it earlier, right? That corporate buy-in. Harneet, you talked about it as well. Making sure that you get the right stakeholders in. You let them know why you're looking to do this. You get their input into it and get them on board. They need to be rallying behind this for you. And then, I'm going to ask you, Harneet, if you don't mind, to talk through some of these other things, because I do think, that there's a lot that goes into the thought behind the approach, the planning, and really getting everybody aligned to start with.
Absolutely. So, we can always talk about that most of the rebranding initiatives will always be top down, unless in some cases there's a lot of push for a new brand or new brand communication coming from the people on the ground, so actual food soldiers who are trying to say that our brand represents a lot more and we need to change. So most cases will not be like that. So in most cases you will have, a corporate change or a change in vision and strategy resulting in the requirement for a new branding strategy. Now, absolutely, the corporate buy-in, but just because one department wants a new brand exercise doesn't mean that everybody else would be on board as well. So, marketing, obviously, that's their job. So they would always be pretty excited, most of the cases, to do it, unless somebody else is initiating it. But you do need to get everybody on board. So, you talk about planning. Now, you're talking about a lot of resources, which will be devoted to an exercise like this. And it's not only monetary resources, it's who's going to do it within each team, who's going to be responsible for all the changes and implementing the changes. So unless you have a buy-in from, the finance team, the accountants, and the fact that people who have to execute it, so, process managers and actual managers and supervisors on the ground, you do need to have everybody's buy-in. So this corporate buy-in represents everybody across the organization. And again, if we all know why we're doing it, in Matt's case, for example, the fact that they believed in delivering an extraordinary connection, extraordinary services to their customers, that is a pretty powerful belief. And I mean, I always joke about, like, the marketing nirvana is when your tagline is actually your company's promise, right? So it rarely happens. Everybody claims to do it, but if your marketing tagline is your company's approach to business, like Hilton does. Hilton hotels are known for that. So, and I think VistaBeam could be a Visp example as well. So again, coming back to thoughtful approach. You think of brands you like. So we're doing this because we have examples. We do worry about the failures, but we got to talk about all the others who have done it who've done it the right way, and obviously that becomes inspiring for other people to do it. And key players, again, you're talking about the resources, financial resources. They need to be on board. They need to know that we ordered all that extra merchandise and all the branding supplies, and you're telling us now these are all garbage, and we have to go and start again and order again, all the notepads and all the branding merchandise stuff. So there's got to be some tough questions which will be asked, and obviously it's very important to get everybody involved. And I always believe, like, if you're doing a mega exercise, even if you're like a 10-man team or a 20-people company, you need to have some key players and kind of form a special committee of sorts of people who can hold this rebranding exercise on their shoulders and then take it forward. So you definitely need some key people to move this around. And competitive analysis, again, just to touch upon that fact that there's got to be some good reasons why we're doing it, and we need to know what our competitors are doing. So how everybody else in this market is trying to communicate their value to their customers. We can obviously learn from them, and then we can do a better job of it. So I think the process, as you've written down there, is really, really important.
And I want to mention a couple of things also. Competitive analysis, right? This might, a lot of people might look at this and go, well, why am I doing that here and now? This will save you a lot of heartache later, because the subconscious and the unconscious mind will work wonders on you. And at the end of a process, if you have not done the competitive analysis, you might just look like your number one competitor at the end of it because of the way the unconscious mind works. So getting that information up front is really important. You get your colors, you get your message, you get your taglines about your competitors, their brand promises, all of that, because again, it's about creating a differentiator that you can stand out from the crowd. When we put here think of brands that you like, Matt is a great example of Volkswagen as being a brand that he decided in his company, right, Matt, to align with from a look and feel and, get inspiration from.
It started with a V, and that's what the first name of our company. So that was kind of the start of it. As part of this process, I think what really helped us a lot was bringing in somebody from the outside that had some good expertise. And it's really hard. A lot of us in the WISP market are very technically oriented, and we think in terms of spending $10,000 on equipment to put more people on versus spending money on somebody to come up with a logo or help with branding. A lot of us don't think of that as a very good investment, but it's kind of a multiplier. It's like you buy all this equipment, but if you aren't running it at its full capability, then you're not really getting full value out of it. And I kind of look at the business that way too. If you don't take the time to actually get somebody that really knows what they're doing with the branding to help you develop that, you're not going to get the full effect out of it. And we actually brought somebody in that did all these steps that you're talking about here, that looked at the competitive analysis outside of our own perspective, because we know our product inside and out, but we don't know what our perception from the public is. And it was one of our tough choices. If we were going to do something, one of the issues we ran into was that there were like 6 companies offering broadband in our area, and their names all started with V. but we had been here the longest and had the most established brand name in most of these areas. So we decided we're going to stick to it. And yes, there might be Vero and Verizon and Visionary and Vive. And I mean, it's literally all these other companies that all start with a V, but we are owning that V. You know, Volkswagen is going to have to take it back from us.
Yeah, and I will say, branding exercises can be tens of thousands of dollars, right? Not just 110, but many of them. And there are different approaches to it. It's not just maybe you'll go through exercises where they'll ask, what kind of animal would your company be? What kind of car would your company be? What kind of technology solution, right? And that kind of helps to shape what that personality is of your company without you having to really put the words to it. That's the hardest part. And a good brand agency will help just extract a lot of that information from getting your input on a lot of different things, so they can then come back to you and say, well, this is really what we took out of it. And they translate that to you in a way that really propels who you are. There's a lot that goes into how to rebrand. So I apologize, viewers. We're going to continue on this because, we just did the precursor to the start of an initiative, because in this process, you also have to go through your messaging and your core values and all of this stuff. And I know Matt and Harneet, when you've gone through this before, it may be updating and it could be a whole rewrite, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one key point I want to talk about on this slide is keywords. The fact that I've been spending a lot of time digital with a lot of clients and companies. Some of the people I work with actually underrate this a lot. Like the fact that you're thinking about a rebrand, and if you already have some sense of what that's going to be and you know the name, definitely use all the keyword planner tools out there to see that whether your name, what you're trying to bid on in the future, could mean a lot of different things in a lot of other contexts. So you need to know, you need to do the analysis and make sure that you're choosing something which, one, should not have a lot of traffic against it, because if you're trying to bid against everybody else, which is pretty generic, you will have that problem. And then obviously understanding the contextual framework around it. So your name or the brand you're going to go to should not mean a lot of different things in a lot of different cultural contexts as well. So I think the keyword search is pretty important when I look at the digital framework, but obviously everything else is important as well. So your messaging, your taglines, again, as I said, it's very rare that your tagline becomes your company's promise. Everybody tries to do it, but rarely, your tagline might be completely different. And you can see a lot of online trolling on brands where their tagline means something, but their brand promise and delivery is very different. So you need to be very careful of the taglines you choose. And obviously they should be descriptive, but they should be able to, your company should be able to live up to your tagline. So that's what I believe.
And we're going to go into taglines in just a bit. Matt, I'd love for you to talk about that. Before we go there, I wanted to make two comments. One is this same approach we encourage you to do when you're naming products as well. So, it might be a company, but your product names are really important. And I think, Matt, you have a good story about product naming, because what do we do in this industry? We abbreviate everything. There's an acronym for it all. So, remember, when you're coming up with product names, no matter how great it is, if that acronym has a meaning to the greater public that is different than your intention, that's probably not a good name, right, Matt?
Yeah. So a previous company I worked at, they wanted to put out a little bit of a rebrand to try and excite our customers, and it was the timing was bad because we had just instituted a price increase that was not well received, and they wanted to focus on customer service. So they focused on positively outrageous service, but that got shorted to the POS plan. And so here was POS all over everything, right in the middle of a price increase. And we really had not stepped up customer service. And so the company got a reputation for being a POS. And
that's
I
not
probably don't need to I don't need to elaborate on what most people probably think of POS, and it's not point of sale. It's something else.
You got it. All right, I'm going to transition to the next slide. I think it's the taglines. Yeah, so, really ways to use taglines, and I'm going to give it back to you, Matt, because I think you've done an extraordinary job, weaving this into your brand.
Yeah, so you can see, like, we've got the tagline on all of our vehicles. And I have to say something about vehicle wraps too. I was not a big believer in vehicles. I thought that that was the sort of thing where, you get as cheap of a vehicle as you can and you run it into the ground. And one day I was meeting with a customer who's a friend of mine that has an electrical contracting business. And he's like, man, the thing I just don't get is, like, there's these companies that they'll put out a decent product, but then they send their people out in these junky equipment. The guy gets out in, like, a worn t-shirt and his hair's all over the place, and to come do work. And he's like, that just gives off a terrible impression. And not 60 seconds later, one of my guys pulled up, and he was in a giant white van that had, like, a little VistaBeam sticker on it. It might as well have said free candy. And he gets out and he's got a torn t-shirt and he hasn't shaved for 3 days and his hair's everywhere. I'm just like, well, there's my sign that we need to step it up. So not long after that, we started upgrading our fleet of equipment. And every time we got a nice new truck, we put a really nice wrap. We just included a nice vehicle wrap and good ladder rack and all the equipment they needed to do their job efficiently. And it's one of the things, you can buy a ladder for $50 at Walmart and a guy can use it. But if you buy the $200 ladder, it might save them 30 minutes a day, or it might save them 45 minutes a day, and that time adds up. So and then if you have a nice vehicle, it's not going to break down and be on the side of the road and look like hell. My answer to that was, I get another beater, and if that one breaks down, they take the other beater out. Wrong answer. That just gives a terrible impression. So it helped a lot for our type of business to make sure that all of our installers have nice equipment that's relatively new, and if it isn't brand new, that at least it's well maintained and clean. They have to go through the car wash once a week to make sure everything looks good. But that's part of it. We're not gonna be offering an extraordinary level of service if we have people that are driving around in clunkers that look like they're giving out free candy on outside of playgrounds. So that was actually a big part of it. But yeah, we took the extraordinary connections. It's out through all of our marketing, website, online, wraps, outdoor advertising. We've used that with billboards, has been great. It doesn't really sell a specific service, but it has greatly raised our brand awareness. Before we had started this, there were a lot of people who didn't know what VistaBeam did. And we found that our awareness within all of our communities has gone up by a large percentage because of that. And, just keeping that in there. I would also throw out clothing, making sure that employees that are going out in the field, that's the first contact in person that most people have with your company. So you want to make sure that they've got nice company branded shirts, jackets, caps, whatever, that they show up and they're well branded and present themselves in a way that's going to reflect good on your company.
Yeah, really, really well done with the tagline. And I can't stress enough that a brand is about an emotional appeal. It's how you make people feel when they interact with you, and it gets translated into everything from those touch points that you were talking about to, when they see a clean or a dirty car on the road. And again, it's the imagination that you're trying to create for them. As you could see, yeah, your extraordinary connections, image there is a mother with her children on a wireless device. it could be just about sharing a story with those kids, not just about the wireless connectivity. So, it's telling that story and an emotional appeal.
Well, we really focus on empowerment for our customers and respect for our customers. That's one of the reasons ISPs have such a low rating with customers, is because they don't respect them.
Yeah.
You know, that's the joke, is us business would be great if it wasn't for the customers. Well, customers are the ones that pay the bill and generate growth. So it's a lot easier to take care of the customers that you have than it is to try and go get new customers to replace the ones that you made mad.
Yep. Yep. And, before you, finalize anything, always check your URLs, your trademarks. Matt, my advice to you is trademark everything that you do, because, some of the big boys tend to steal it from you. So if you own the trademark, then they're going to have to abide by, the legal guidelines that you put them in. Make sure that if you are doing a rebrand, that you take that new corporate name, you do your corporate filings. You get a whole team of people outside of marketing. You've got finance and legal that help you with all of this type of stuff. But don't forget these really important things. And then, you talked about the brand book development and how key that is for making sure that once you have finalized that brand, that look, the feel, the content, the colors, everything is specified into a book. You hand that off to the company, and they are supposed to take that and be able to run with that to the details that are outlined there. Let's talk about some internal stuff, right? We both, all of us, right, have to, kind of be able to reveal that brand before it goes to market, internally, externally. Harnita, got you nodding your head there. You want to chime in here?
Absolutely. So again, the fact that everybody internally has to be on board, and they're kind of your biggest customers to start with. Let's say the marketing team is presenting the plan. They need to get everybody who's involved, again, share the ideas. And it's always not my way or the highway. It's all about, we did this exercise, we had the group planning, we did the sessions with the external consultants, as in Matt's case as well. And now we're talking about, this is what we have come up with. This is how we believe it represents the brand, and this is how the future vision is. And if you do that internal selling, as you can call it, that's really, really important. So it's all about, getting the initial feedback. Obviously different teams can have their own perspectives, and it's always good to have different eyeballs. Like, for example, whenever we internally in our company do any major public exercise, which will involve communication going out in any format, and I believe if that is risky enough that it needs to be vetted by more people, we always have an internal kind of a focus group that I can quickly run by in Slack and present a couple of ideas and get a quick kind of a vote from people to see, where they're lining up. And sometimes you can always find your vision of a particular thing may be very different than a lot of other people. So it's always good to have other people to do a sanity check, as we like to call it. So if it's even a big email going out, we like to do a sanity check. So I think stuff like that internally is very, very important. So, I think the internal people need to be sold first before you go to the external agencies.
Yeah.
Just to kind of throw in on that, I think a big chunk of the rebranding is also internal, to kind of help as you mentioned, kind of reset a lot of the employees to make sure that they know this is what the expectation is, and this is how we're going to do things. But then also internal, like marketing to your branding to your existing customers, because since day one, fixed wireless has been very strong on word of mouth advertising. It's the most powerful force that we have, because we can't operate on the same scale as big national companies. So one of the things we did was really worked on marketing internally to our existing customers, to where we've given out a lot of free coffee mugs and T-shirts and pens and hats and all kinds of different things like that. If somebody gives us a positive review on Google or Facebook, that's a customer, they get a gift package. We've got like an internal referral program that we use to kind of bring people to us. And a key part of that was making it so that the customer, that not only would they get a credit, but we set aside $50 for this, but the customer that customer referring a new customer gets $25 and the new customer gets another 25. So not only a lot of programs are just based, you get a $50 referral referring somebody. We set it up so it actually goes both directions. And that really helped kind of activate, psychologically, people actually like being able to give something like that out as opposed to just getting it for themselves. So
yeah,
a lot of things you can do to help with the internal marketing as well.
And Matt's got some really great ideas for a tech guy. You got a lot of marketing ideas, which is great.
I will be honest. I am repeating what other people have done. This is mostly my wife's doing, so I have to give her all the credit for it. This is just me repeating what we did. So.
But we got to give you credit, Matt, because you're drinking the Kool-Aid. And when we're talking about branding, I talked about that emotional response that we're trying to get out of people, but it's also the story, right? And that brand is supposed to tell a story. And when you talk internally and you share that story, people remember stories and they remember how they feel. All the other stuff kind of goes away. And so when you're able to convey your rebrand or your new brand as a storyline, then everybody in the company becomes your brand ambassadors externally, and all of that. And so, there's a lot that goes into the how, right? Public relations, analysts, media relations. This is a PITA. And if you guys know what a PITA is, then you'll appreciate this. Come on, guys. How many search and replaces and directory updates have you had to do and probably are still doing with your brands? It's a never-ending process. So think about that. If you're a company and you're looking to rebrand, how are you going to replace all of those old logos and old company names? You have to look at every single thing on Google and actually go out and try to get the people on the other side to react and do what you're asking them to do. Directories happen to be a little bit easier, but this is a process that is ongoing. It's for years, and I don't want you guys to poo-poo that. It's a really important element. Sidebar, I am a PR person, so public relations and analyst media relations are really key here. They help propel that. They help tell that story about your brand story. They help get that explanation out there. It gives you an excuse to talk about your products and your service capabilities, and your commitment to the market. So, I was alluding to this one earlier, Matt, how your brilliant marketing shines. And, this is a great example of a differentiator and, as you were talking about, right, positive results. So take it away.
Yeah, so I mentioned previously that Freedom Spectrum was where we tried to market our new stuff. And when Charter rebranded, we knew we weren't going to be able to continue that for very long. So that's where we really doubled down on the extraordinary connections and started putting that out there. We also decided to change our plan names around. Before, we had plans that were focused on what the speed was. And I've seen companies that have, 10 different speed plans that you can choose from. And I think Hartneet has a lot more experience in marketing than I do, but I think he could probably talk about the psychology of it. But you want to have few options. So we came down to 3 possible options for residential. The value one, and it took a long time before we came up with the name value because there's all kinds of different, the stuff that we went through to try and come up with something that, had a positive connotation to it rather than cheap.
Cheap.
So,
yeah.
So value was, the best we could come up with. And then the fast, and then the max, and it was really close between top speed and max on the fast package, but we just basically simplified it to that. Took the speeds out because the speeds are actually different depending on the area that people are in. So some areas have more capacity than others, so they will get faster speeds there. Others don't, and we're working to get everything up to a certain standard, but until we get there, just simplifying this down made everything a lot simpler to market. made it a lot clearer in people's minds. The value connotation's good, but you'd be surprised how many people pick the fast one. I think just because it says fast, I don't know if they actually use that much more. But
Actually, I'll stop you there. They pick the fast because of something called in online pricing. If you look at your last point there, it's actually known as the middle option syndrome. So if you go to any online tier, Netflix or anything where you see three options, people are most likely to pick the option in the middle because nobody considers, unless they really want to save money, nobody wants to buy the cheap package. I like how you call it value, but nobody wants to buy the cheap package. And the fact that it's fast, and the beauty of the word fast right in the middle is just so much positivity in that pricing tier that I'm not surprised why people would mostly go for the fast one. Yeah.
And this is actually, we just recently did a price increase, and we were at $39.95, $49.95, $69.95, and decided to do a 10% price increase, which put us at the 43, 54, and 76. And according to Hartneet, we hit it on having odd numbers for our pricing, and I don't quite understand it, but it has helped minimize the negative market perception.
Yeah, yeah. It is I'm a middle child. It's the middle syndrome.
People will always choose the middle one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great marketing there again. As Alyssa said, you guys need all the credit you can get.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for being here, Matt. Thank you, Harneet. I mean, great insights and, things to remember. And, salespeople are really good at this. They tell their sales story over and over again. It's the same thing with your company and your brand. You're going to tell it over and over again, but remember that you're the only one that hears you telling it all over again. Maybe the people that work for you, but those who you're telling it to may be hearing it for the first time or the second time. And Harneet, right, I'm sure you've done all of the psychological study readings on how many times do you have to tell someone until they actually retain it themselves?
That number used to be 7, I think, in 1960 or something. Now I think it's in 700s of sorts. Humankind has an attention span less than that of a jellyfish, as per research. So I think we need to be told something multiple times before we even start acknowledging that exists. So yeah, keep repeating it and keep believing your own story so that other people will start believing it too.
And if we can figure out how to make your brand also have a smell, we'll be able to get it into people's heads better, because you need to visually tell it. You have to, tell it with text and words. You have to put it into motion, in action, in practice. Repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse. This is not a lie.
I'll tell you the smell we're imparting now is hand sanitizer to all
That's
of our
right.
customers. Smell that quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had some notes here from from obviously experience over time about staying away from a branding failure. So a lot of times, as we have seen in the past, and we know some brands ourselves who will just do it because they feel like it is a reasonable reason, but not all the time. So the fact that you are focusing on your brand story, and again, going back to Matt's example, that when you bring your team together and you do that exercise, the focus group, the fact that you were able to bring everybody on board is because they believe the fact that the new brand can represent the value they're delivering to their customers. So the focus on the brand story is more important than any aesthetics of sorts. Obviously, changing colors, if you're moving mediums and stuff, is important, but the fact that you're actually representing a change in your brand story is extremely important. So if that is your core driving reason, the chances of you having a lot of branding success are definitely there. And customer loyalty and affinity, again, go back to Yahoo case. I mean, a lot of us feel more affectionate and nostalgic about the older logo than the new ones because they have built some loyalty over time. And if you were to change everything overnight, people will be not very happy about it. And most people are not, very welcoming of changes. So, it's really important to not underestimate your customer loyalty and affinity for something you might underestimate for. And again, the line is rebranding is a marathon. It involves so many resources, so many people in the company, and it's a long-term project, not an overnight success. So if everybody believes in it and everybody is committed to it, I see no reasons why an organization cannot completely go for a rebrand.
Amen on that marathon. Thank you. I'm going to hand it back to Matt. This, by the way, is not a success. So,
No,
and with any good success stories also comes a non-success story.
yeah. So we had a period in there from the time we started until we did our recent rebrand where we didn't have a marketing person, and the tech guys were in charge of coming up with different things, with the exception of Speedy the dog, which actually was fairly well received. Speedy, the stock photography dog that showed up in about a zillion ads around the same time, probably done by other tech guys. But we were like, man, we need to come up with something. So 4G had just been released. We decided, let's talk about 5G then. We were way ahead of the time to start talking about 5G. And then, well, how do we differentiate that from cellular? Well, it's fixed wireless. So FTW for the win, 5G for the win. That was our idea and what we should do. And it was just a complete flop because it wasn't cute. You can see this ugly logo that us tech guys came up with, which was a complete disaster by just about any design standpoint. And this didn't work. We were not communicating value to the customer, and it just didn't carry it. So this is my true level of talent at this point. So I'm going to refer any further questions about this stuff to the actual talent in my company. So just so you're completely aware, full disclosure.
So I just want you to know, I think both Harneet and I both earned our credibility back because we were so enamored with the success of your brand. We were able to bring it back down that you had a lot to go through in order to be able to get to success. And that really is the point between all of this, right, Harneet?
Absolutely, bringing him back to the human level now.
Right.
You would not believe I have. We did a deal where me and one of my guys went around dressed up as the Net Brothers, running around fixing stuff. There's some hilarious video on YouTube of that. We had some interesting fails on some of our radio ads. They're fun to laugh at now.
Yep. And while you're, not all brands get, tremendous success, but you are going to get success when you do a rebrand. And these are some of the things that you can expect from a brand or a rebrand project. And it takes time, right? You have to talk to your customers. You got to get input. You have to be ready to receive, critical feedback. But it can do so many great things for yourselves. And as leaders at companies and in marketing, it helps you to align and unify your entire company. It allows you to build a corporate community with a team. It helps you to improve your public perception. You get people talking about you. And it really is reinvigorating, right, guys?
Yeah, I think a really big part of it is branding can help build your company culture because it's one of the unifying things that everybody in your company can feel. And when we see somebody that's not doing something that goes along with our message of trying to be extraordinary and trying to respect our customers, it's like really clear because that just isn't tolerated in the culture anymore. So that it goes a long ways within the company as well as outside the company.
Yeah. Harneet, any final words to add to this?
I absolutely agree with both of you. Yep.
Excellent. Well, we've had such a great time today. Thank you both. I hope you all learned something. And obviously, if you have any questions for Matt, Harneet, myself, we are here for you. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to shake your hands. Better off that way right now. We're all going to refrain from going viral. We've gone virtual. And we hope you learned something. Thank you.